Good afternoon, fourth grade. We are going to read another folk tale today. And then during parallel teaching, we're going to compare Aunt Jen and Min Lee. But today we're going to read a folk tale that is called The Shining Lodge. And it is another Native American folk tale. All right, we're going to do our fill-in-the-blank summary to get us started. Min Lee and Dragon had to cross an inlet to get to the city of Bright Moonlight on their way to meet the Old Man of the Moon. A goldfish swam up to them because she thought Dragon was her Aunt Jen. She told Min Lee and Dragon the story of the Dragon Gate. Based on the goldfish's description of Aunt Jen, Min Lee thinks the goldfish she bought and released was Aunt Jen. Our focus question for the day is press pause to fill in the blanks and play when you're ready for the focus question. Our focus question for today is who is Aunt Jen and what can we infer about her character from the goldfish's description of her? We want to know how are Min Lee and Aunt Jen similar and how are they different? Our vocabulary words remain the same as yesterday, so please draw a line from the picture to the word, and then you can turn the page. You can go ahead and tear off the last 3 pages in your packet that are the Shining Lodge. So you want to tear off that story and put it side by side along with your notes, just like your screen. And we are going to use our CSBS strategy to try to figure out what type of folktale the Shining Lodge is. I'm at It Was 1,000 Moons Ago. It was 1,000 moons ago when Satsaki, a young Indian girl whose name means feather lady, wakened early one morning among the tall prairie grasses. She and her older sister had been sleeping outside their teepee because it was very warm. "Oh, sister, look at the lovely morning star. I shall never marry any man here on earth, but that bright, beautiful star is going to be my husband," said Feather Lady, enchanted. And we can stop right there because we have information about our main character. And make sure you have this underlined and labeled in your text. Our main character is Feather Lady. She is a young Sasaki Indian girl, and she wants to marry the morning star. In the first part of box 1, we would write, Feather Lady is a Sasaki young girl who wants to marry the morning star. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the quote. And we would write down the last sentence of the second paragraph that says, "That bright, beautiful star is going to be my husband," said Feather Lady. Press pause to write down the quote in the second part of box 1 and play when you're ready for the setting. We have 2 settings. This first setting that we just learned about, it says the story takes place 2,000 moons ago. And we know that they are in a Native American village. So in the first part of box 2, I would write, the story takes place on Earth 2,000 moons ago in a Native American village. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the focus question. Let's continue reading. We're at the 3rd paragraph. The sister did not like being roused so early, and being annoyed, she ran into the camp and told the people what a foolish thing Feather Lady had said. Even though her tribesmen believed in magic stories of giants and spirits and winged canoes, they laughed at Feather Lady's idea. The Feather Lady soon forgot what she had said. A few days later, she and her sister went into the forest to gather wood. When they had their packs made and were lifting up to their shoulders by the pack straps, Feather Lady's strap broke. Every time she made up her pack and tried to tie it, the strap would break again. Her sister, who was standing beside her with the load of wood on her back, began to grow weary. She said, I'm going home with my bundle. You can follow. Let's keep going. When Feather Lady was left alone, she heard a voice say, Feather Lady, I am the morning star. She trembled and looked up. A bright youth stood in the river path. He was tall and straight, his hair long and glistening. He was dressed in a beaver skin robe, and the fragrance of pine and sweet grass was around him. Don't you remember? You want to marry me, he said to her. He took a long eagle feather and stuck it upright in her hair. He gave her a branch of juniper from which trailed 2 spider webs. Next, he had her take hold of the upper strand and place her feet on the lower one. Then he told her to shut her eyes. In a second, they were transported on the sparkling web to the roof of the world. Turn the page. When she opened her eyes, Feather Lady found herself standing before a shining lodge with Morning Star beside her. This was the home of his father and mother, the sun and moon. And we will stop right there because we have our second setting. And in box 2, we would write, the story also takes place in the sky of the shining lodge, the home of the sun, the moon, the morning star, and Feather Lady. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready to keep reading. We're at the sun. The sun was away on his daily journey across the sky. The moon welcomed Feather Lady kindly and dressed the girl in a soft robe of buckskin trimmed with elk teeth. When the sun came home that night, he was pleased with Feather Lady and called her his daughter. So she was married to Morning Star. They all lived together very happily in the shining lodge, and after a while, Feather Lady had a baby named Star Boy. One day, the Moon Mother gave Feather Lady a root digger and said, You may go everywhere about Skyland and dig up all kinds of roots, but you must never touch the great turnip that grows near our lodge. If you do, deep unhappiness will come to every one of us, for that turnip is medicine. Day after day, Feather Lady wandered about with Star Boy on her back, digging up roots. She often passed the great turnip, but never touched it. Then one day she was curious what lay beneath. So she put Star Boy on the ground and began to dig. Her root digger soon struck the side of the great turnip, and she could not pull it out. Just then 2 beautiful snow-white loons from the far north flew overhead. She called to them for help. They sang a magic song, and the great turnip was uprooted. Feather Lady looked down through the hole where the turnip had been. Far below, she saw the camp on earth where she once lived, the trees, the rivers, and the lodges of her people. Smoke was rising from the wigwams. She could hear the children laughing and playing, and the women singing at their work. She was filled with homesickness and went back weeping to the shining lodge. All right, we have our problem. The Feather Lady is homesick because she uprooted the great turnip, which she was not supposed to do. So in box 3, we will write, after Feather Lady marries the Morning Star, she pulls up a turnip that she's not supposed to and brings unhappiness to her life. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the quote. And we would write down this sentence towards the end of page 30. We would write down, she was filled with homesickness and went back weeping to the shining lodge, because that shows that she's unhappy. Press pause to write down the quote and play when you're ready to keep reading. We're at the bottom of the page. Morning Star looked at her very sorrowfully. Alas, alas, my dear Feather Lady, he said, you have uprooted the great turnip. The sun and moon were troubled. They loved Feather Lady dearly, but they knew she must now return to earth because of her curiosity and disobedience. So Morningstar took Featherlady sadly by the hand. He warned her not to let Starboy touch the ground for 14 days, or he would return to the sky as a star. Turn the page. He told her to mark the sign on the bark of her lodge on earth, so she would be warned daily of her duty, but to tell no one. Then he placed little Starboy on her back and led her to the Spider-Man, who lived in Skyland. Spider-Man wove a beautiful web, glittering with dew, in the hole where the great turnip had been. They wrapped Featherlady in an elk hide and let her and her little boy gently down to the earth upon the web. Featherlady's people saw her coming like a falling star. Her path was the Milky Way, on which souls always go back and forth to heaven. "Here is Featherlady who never came back with her wood," they said. Her parents welcomed her and loved little Starboy. Then her mother sent her for water. She cautioned her mother to keep the child on the pile of furs and not let him touch the ground. The grandmother wasn't so careful because she didn't understand the reason for watching the child so closely. When her back was turned, the boy crawled off the furs back onto the bare earth. When his grandmother saw him, she grabbed him up and put him back as quickly as she could. This seemed to make the child cross, for he pulled a robe over his face. The grandmother paid no more attention to him. When Starboy's mother returned, she looked around and said, "Where is my child?" "Oh, he covered himself up with this robe," said the grandmother. Featherlady rushed to the pile of furs, pulled back the robe, and found nothing there. That evening she looked up into the sky. A new star glittered in the hole where she had pulled up the turnip. Then she knew what had become of her child. So that is the way the North Star came to be. It is called the Nail of the North and always stands still. All the other stars moved around it. The half circle of stars in the east of the North Star is the lodge of the Spider-Man and is called the Northern Crown. The bright stars just beyond in the constellations of Hercules, the Indians believe to be his 5 fingers, with which he spun the web on which Featherlady and her child, Starboy, were let down to earth. All right, and so we have boxed in this third paragraph from the bottom for our solution. And so Featherlady, because she was homesick, she was returned to earth, but she didn't follow Morningstar's directions, and her child becomes the North Star. And we would write down in box 4, get ready to write, Featherlady returns to her village. However, she doesn't follow Morningstar's directions, and her child becomes the North Star. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the quote. And the quote that we would write down is this: "A new star glittered in the hole where she had pulled up the turnip. Then she knew what had become of her child." Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the paragraph. The paragraph asks, what type of folk tale is the story? How do you know? So you should go into your homeschool journal and look at your folk tales checklist. You should think about the character, the setting, the problem, and the solution to figure out what type of folk tale it is.